Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Applying Managed Services to Your Pipeline. My name is Sharon Shaw, and I'm the president of a company called Integrator Support. I am familiar with some of you today in the audience, and some of you I'm not, so if we haven't met, we will be attending the PSA convention, so that might be a good time to set up an appointment. Otherwise, feel free to contact us. Our website is just integratorsupport.com, and our contact information is listed there as well. But let's go ahead and get started. First of all, when we were talking about what the next webinar session was going to be, what should the next topic be, what are people facing out there in the field with the sales effort to generate managed services or recurring revenue type sales. And fortunately in my position, because I work with so many integrators like you there in the audience, I hear a lot about the sales process and what their concerns are, but probably the most impacting factor is that of the internal processes at each of the respective organizations that I've been working with. Sometimes it has to do with just the way the sales team's been structured. Sometimes it has to do with a lack of understanding of, what customers these services are best suited for. So today's topic is hoping to bridge the gap between both of those things. Talking about if you have pipeline projects, stuff that you're working on, opportunities that have come to you through either an existing relationship from the past or even new prospects. How do you apply a managed services sale to these projects? One of the biggest challenges is that these services are new to a lot of our end user customers. They don't know that you can have a virtual security guard. They don't know that hosted access control might save them a lot of money up front and allow them to be more mobile and utilize any web portal to be able to manage their access control database. So because they don't know, they're not picking up the phone and saying, hi, Mr. Integrator, I would like you to quote me a virtual security guard quote. They're not asking for that. They don't know it exists. So it's our job to help educate them and inform them. And so that's one of the challenges. Now, on the flip side, think about the opportunity in that. When you guys get to go to your customers, your prospects, and share with them the latest and greatest in both technology and really just industry trends. What is the trend in security right now? How can we better protect and safeguard people and property from harm? It's your opportunity to educate them about this. So your biggest challenge is also probably your biggest opportunity. Now on the other side, when you're doing the actual sale, I've heard some of the sales team say, gosh, there's 3 other bids on the table. We know none of them have any kind of ongoing cost associated with those quotes. We're going to stand out. We're going to look like, we're asking them to commit all this time. It's hard. It's hard to ask someone to commit and sign on the dotted line, not just for a one-time transaction, but this is a relationship. They're opting in for, I'd hope, at least a year, but certainly 3 years is probably where your goal should be for these contracts. And, so that is another concern that I hear a lot. And on the flip side of that, where's the opportunity? Your bid stands out. Your bid is unique. So if there's 4 or 5 others on the table, don't worry about it because you're going to stand out and be different. And since when was differentiation a bad thing? So I want you guys to think about this very openly and honestly about yourselves, your customers, the projects you're working on today, and start thinking if these methods will help you see the opportunity. Because I will tell you that until you believe yourself that these services are the right fit and the right solution for your customers won't. You have to know that these services work. You have to believe that they're going to be better off using these kinds of services than they are doing it sort of the traditional, conventional way. Okay? So if you ever question that, if you're unsure about whether or not these services work, whether or not, video analytics is something that's really reliable. Whatever your concerns might be, feel free to ask. We'll have a Q&A at the end of the session. I want this to be as open and candid as possible, because that's how we'll really get to the meat and the value of this presentation today. So we're going to review 5 steps. If you read the description for today's webinar, there's 5 steps associated with applying services to a project that's already on your desk, a quote that you're already working on. The first step is to evaluate the opportunity. And then you determine which service you're going to offer. Prepare the proposal. Submit the proposal. And then lastly, close the sale. Now, before we get into step 1, I'm going to share a story with you. And I'm sure you guys could relate to some of this. One of my dealers hired somebody and said, okay, this is your job. Your job is to go out and sell these RMR generating services. And the salesperson was from outside the industry, so had very little experience, with security, if any at all. But his job was not to know security like you guys know security. His job was to go talk to customers, generate interest, and then kind of come back to the experts for the system design and all of that. Well, after a couple of months getting their feet wet, this person started quoting jobs and, just getting a feel for what the customers would ask. And he started facing this challenge where within his organization, he would generate an interest, a lead. He'd come back to the office and say, okay, we need to work on this estimate. And the estimator was too busy to help him. Okay? The project manager looked at the size of the project and said, what is this, 6 cameras? I'm working on something that has 106 cameras. I'm going to go focus on that, and you can figure this out later. And so, what happened was, they weren't getting the support that they needed internally. Now, I don't know if your companies have hired anybody like that, where that is their job, or maybe you're the person and it's part of your job or all of your job to do it yourself. But what ended up happening, and this is just, something that I think we can all relate to, is this individual was sitting in his cube, minding his own business, and he overheard one of the senior account managers talking about a project that he was working on, and found out that it was an outdoor video surveillance project where there were some rail cars that were being vandalized and broken into, and different pieces of equipment were disappearing and things like that. And so they had quoted a nice, surveillance system with an Exact and VR and, a nice-looking project. And so this individual went over to the account manager and said, hey, did you quote monitoring on that project? Because, man, that's the ideal application. And they said, no, they don't need monitoring. Okay, well, why? He said, well, even if they did, or even if this is a good opportunity, we already submitted the bid, and there's 3 others that we're competing against. And so this person decided that he was going to, press the issue. So he did, and he was very persistent. So they went in, and after they had already submitted their proposal, they submitted a revised proposal, which included professional video monitoring. And they got a phone call from the end user, come back for another site walk, explain to us how this is going to work. They go out there, they called me, we answered some of their questions over the phone together, and the people that managed that location each day really liked the idea, because lo and behold, they had hired some security staff to tour the property at night because of these issues. And the surveillance system was going in to try to hold those guys accountable for what they hired them to do. And then when they realized that they could just use the technology in a virtual security guard and have a more effective solution than they were having, all of a sudden they started to realize how much money they could save on the security guards that they had had. And really the fact that they knew that items that would be addressed. In the past they came in and things were still happening, and it seemed like the security guards were ineffective. So now they feel like this is going to hold some more accountability with the audit trails and things like that. It went up 2 or 3 different levels in the decision-making chain for this end user. And they decided that yes, we do want to do this. They signed the contract. So this guy, okay, was very bold, and he stood up for what he knew was right, and he went out and he wasn't afraid to educate the customer. He wasn't afraid of what questions they might have and, you know, whether or not they'd have the answers. He wasn't afraid of asking for the ongoing revenue because he knew that it was the right solution. Now, that's where I want you guys to get to. Now, whether you've already bought in to these virtual security services or not, you know, we can address that. We can talk about whatever concerns you have specifically. But I wanted to share that story with you because now that seasoned account manager that originally said, they don't need this, this isn't what they asked for, all of a sudden he's calling me almost every day for ideas and other projects that he's working on. So that was one of the things that said, wow, okay, so if he can figure this out, if he can now connect the dots, so can you. So that's why we're talking about this today. So let's start with the first part of the process, which is evaluating the opportunity. You need to consider the size of the customer. And I know that each of you has a different market you serve, different verticals, different, you know, sized projects that you work on. But it's important just to evaluate if something's on your desk, let's look at it. What does their IT look like? Do they have, you know, a staff, you know, that manages their IT? Are they, you know, very well educated, well informed? Do they understand, you know, network security and things like that? How about security personnel, physical security, I mean? You know, these people, do they have anybody responsible for doing tours? Do they have anybody staring at a matrix of monitors all day long? Do they have anybody sitting in a booth at a gate, controlling that gate and permitting access to different people? That's another thing to consider. How about their budget? Do you have a feel for what, you know, what their budget is based on what they're asking for? Have you asked that question? Do you know? What is their budget? The next part of evaluating the opportunity is the concerns of the customer. What is causing them to ask for security in the first place? Are they experiencing things like in that top bullet, vandalism, theft, loitering, those kinds of things that could be prevented through professional video monitoring services? Or are they doing it mainly for compliance or just, you know, as part of their operational processes and managing traffic? You know, what is their major concern? And this stuff, don't guess, ask. We have a sales manual that will take you step by step through that consultative selling process, asking the probing questions that help you determine what is the right solution for this customer. Now, knowledge base, okay? We talked about size, budget, things like that, but now let's talk about how educated the customer is. How much do they know about security technology? What are their areas of expertise? What is their business model? And how does security fit into their business? And then are they looking at, you know, current policies, you know, that they're implementing, or do they have some kind of goal? You know, are they trying to prevent something from happening? Do they have any kind of goals? What would their ideal solution be? If you ask that customer, so Joe, you know, if this security system could do anything for you, what would be your first pick? What would be the #1 priority to you in this security system? And what would their ideal policy be as far as, you know, who's allowed to go where, when? You know, having a more streamlined process for arming and disarming their system, things like that. What is their current policy versus where do they want to be? Do you know if you have any competition on this project? Do you know what their time frame is on their purchase? Is this a previous relationship or is this a new prospect? That can be really important too, because when you think about it, if you're working on a project with a customer that you've known for years, you know, somebody who, you know, you take out to lunch and, you know, you consider them a friend almost, you know, why not call them, take them out to lunch and say, hey, you know, we're seeing this trend going on in our business, and this is what it's used for. This is how it's been working, and it's been tested. You know, it's crossed the chasm. It's past the guinea pig stage. You know, what do you think about it? I'd like to hear what your thoughts are, and get some feedback. Find out what questions they ask. Ask someone who trusts you, who's familiar with you for that kind of business. Think about what would happen to those existing long-lasting relationships if somebody else came to them with these services before you. What would you do? What would happen if somebody came in and said, oh, you know, we can do this, this, and this for you? And they said, wow, I didn't know that. My other security integrator never told me about that. They must not be keeping up. Yeah, I do want that. Maybe they just don't, they're not in a position to do that. They don't have a monitoring center. Maybe that's why. But that is what I need. I'll take it. And then what happens in the long run if somebody takes over that account? Not only will you lose the opportunity to sell them the services, but most likely you'll lose the opportunity to continue on their systems integration. So it's really important as a relationship thing that you are being that person that's showing them the new way of doing things. So this part is, the second part is determining which service to offer. Now that you've evaluated, you've done a site walk, you've asked the probing questions, you have a really good understanding of what this customer's concerns are as it relates to security and life safety, as well as, you know, what their drivers are and what budget they're working within. So I've broken this part down based upon the different things that they might be looking for, and then I'm showing you which service would be the best. So if they're looking for incident detection and prevention, then event-driven monitoring is probably the best fit for them. And you need to consider, you know, what would trigger the alarm? Would it be video analytics? Would it be an indoor area where video motion detection is sufficient? Would it be other alarm inputs, a panic button, for example? You know, I'm actually starting to get surprised at how creative some of my dealers have become with the things that they're working on. You know, trying to find solutions for things where it's like, unless this guy had a bodyguard, you know, we don't really know what else we could do. But a panic button is a great idea. So events can be triggered by a variety of different things. And we've seen, you know, some things that work that are more common than others. And we've also tried some things that are a little less common, and we've been creative. So we're willing to work with you guys to help develop the right scenario for that customer. If you're looking at an outdoor application where video analytics would be the most effective means of detection, then call us. There are a lot of camera manufacturers or software developers that tell you that this is the way the product works and it works every time, and, you know, facial recognition or object left behind or whatever other kinds of things they can dream up. And, you know, it's funny because one of my dealers, as he rolled this out to his team, decided, I'm going to take them to the monitoring center in Boston. Let them see it. Let them talk to these people, you know, face to face. So that's what they did, and they're all congregated into the conference room. And one of, and I won't name who, but one of even our preferred video analytics manufacturers came in and did a demo. Started explaining how it works, how easy it is, blah, 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 how, you know, low light conditions, not a problem, you know, just all kinds of things, which generally speaking, they're correct, okay? But what I thought was so funny is that that manufacturer left the room. And then everybody's kind of looking around like, okay, you know, taking notes, wondering if, you know, Susie's buying into this or not. And then Jerry Cordasco at G4S came in and said, look, this is what they told you. Let me tell you how it really works. And he explained the process, what they do, what the analytics really can or can't do, how to use them the right way, you know, and all of a sudden you could see that they could relate. And it was like, oh, okay, this is real. This is something that we can actually depend on. So please use us for that expertise. Even if it's something where you don't know if monitoring, you know, can be a factor, call us for recommendations on that stuff, because I will tell you that I've been that salesperson where I know that there's already this installed or this was already quoted, and please, 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 can we monitor these analytics? And unless it's been, truly tested, and that process takes a couple of months at G4S, they won't do it, even if it is compatible with our software. And the reason why is because that detection mechanism, whatever you're using to trigger these alarms, if it doesn't work, we're all in a situation of liability, and we don't want to be there. Okay, it is business, but at the end of the day, it's also risky business. So we need to make sure that we vet products properly. So we have that expertise, and we can help you. So again, if you're looking for incident detection and prevention, event-driven monitoring, in a lot of cases, is the right answer. Now, another thing that's been increasingly popular is this concept of a virtual doorman. So what is a virtual doorman? What does that mean? We can remotely authenticate people through a variety of different ways. We can have them, if there's a camera, around eye level, we can have them put their identification in front of the camera. We can also store a database of JPEG images where we can have headshots of the authorized personnel and verify that they look like the picture, and then a secondary verbal passcode of some sort. Whether it's mother maiden name or a unique numerical code, something like that. But that's usually how we authenticate people, and we can release that door. And depending upon the access control system installed, we have different integrations that allow us to do that through the access control system. Otherwise, we use a little device that has a relay that can power a lock. And a lot of cases, if the access control system is not integrated, our workaround is quite simple by putting that relay line through the request to exit. So it does not trigger a false door forced open alarm in the access control system. The other thing you need to consider, though, with virtual doorman is what kinds of applications, what kinds of projects. If you see a project on your desk, how would I know if a virtual doorman would apply or not? If you're working on property management, where maybe there's, a high-rise kind of commercial building, and people are, coming and going, there's different tenants in there, and somebody could easily forget their card and have to either drive home and go get it, or if we could use this to let them in as sort of a secondary resource. Another case, one that we're actually working on right now, is a women's club, where they have occasional meetings and occasional events and things like that. And because their membership is rather expensive with several hundred people that are involved, they don't want to just issue a whole bunch of cards. I guess that the club itself is located in a rough part of town. So if someone drops a card or something like that, it would just be easy. And they didn't want to have everybody, have to manage a credential. So this is a kiosk kind of scenario where it makes it simpler for them to manage their membership database and who's allowed to come and go at what time. And they were having a receptionist, that was her job, was primarily opening the door and letting members in. And now they're able to reallocate her time to doing something that really helps the club. So the virtual doorman is another thing to consider. A video chaperone. I am actually working on a quote for this right now, where people take their bank deposits out at night, or just in general, now that it's that time of year again when we all rise and it's dark and we get off of work and it's dark. It's kind of risky for some people at certain times of day to be walking from a building to their vehicle, things like that. So consider a video chaperone for scenarios where maybe they've had muggings or they've had some issues with, people feeling insecure or unsafe as they're leaving the building. And when you do that, our pricing is all based on the number of events. Any of these, whether it's an alarm event through event-driven monitoring, it's a chaperone, it's any of the things I'm talking about, it's just an event. So all you need to consider in that estimating process is about how frequently do you think this would occur? And that will help you determine which package to select. And we've done other webinars where we really dissected the price list and talked about that. So if you were unable to attend that, I'd be happy to work with you one-on-one or send you that recording as well. And Another thing that professional video monitoring offers is virtual tours. So if their concern is having more eyes and they have specific concerns, things that we would look for, offer the opportunity for us to do tours. Perhaps they've had somebody sitting in a room staring at a matrix of monitors, and how easy is it to miss something? You know, studies show that after 15 minutes, I think it's 80% of the data that they're looking at gets missed. So how easy would it be for somebody to miss something tragic? Whereas if we do a tour and we are focused at that time for looking at a specific thing in a specific area, it makes it a lot more effective, you know, that actual monitoring process. So the keys to consider with tours would be, if you had more eyes, Mr. Customer, what would you want us to look for? How often would we need to look there to detect what you're asking us to look for? And then what kind of camera coverage would be required in order to do that the right way? So I've been talking a lot about monitoring, and the reason for that is because I've seen my dealers take to that a little bit faster than hosted systems. I don't know if it's just because they see the opportunity as it's more revenue per site and it's an easier return on investment formula to calculate. But we do also offer hosted systems. So when do you know to offer a hosted access control system, for example? If you have a customer that's looking for something that's scalable, something that can be used anywhere, anytime, if maybe they balk at the idea of having to buy a server or buy the software licenses, the annual renewal agreements and things like that, the hosted access control could be a good fit for you. And we also have some recommendations on what to use there. In terms of video surveillance, when would you want to use hosted? That would be if the customer is looking for something that's mobile and, you know, web-based and easy to use, easy to access, you could go with a hosted video option. Now, hosted doesn't necessarily mean you also have to store off-site. I think that's a pretty common misperception. Some systems allow for like a local storage drive to be accessed through the web portal. And basically all it is instead of having to buy a piece of software and licenses for each camera and, you know, dedicate that PC to managing that, they can use a hosted application. And you can use that hosted application to go pull video even if it is stored locally, and live video, of course, as well. And then you can, of course, either offer storage as a redundant solution or as a, you know, instead of this is what we recommend, depending on the size. Now, the thing to consider with hosted video is bandwidth limitation, and so those are some of the things that we can help you with if you need assistance. So use the customer's language when you're preparing the proposal. This step 3 is preparing your proposal. And when I say use the customer's language, tie it directly back into what they told you. When you went through and interviewed them and asked them, well, what concerns you the most? What matters the most? If your surveillance could do anything for you, what would you want it to do? What would you want it to see? What would you want it to stop? And address exactly that. Based on your concern about this is what we recommend in this area. Based on the concern on that, this is what we recommend. Put it in their own language. Directly relate the service's purpose to their key concerns. I've seen some really vague proposals where, and fortunately they weren't ours, but where our dealer had a competitor and they were able to get their hands on the other quote. And they brought it to me, and it's like so vague. It says, like, you know, virtual guard tours, you know, $1,000 a month. And it does not address, well, what are you looking for? When are you going to do these tours? What cameras are you going to look at? You know, it was just very vague. Now, you don't need to overcomplicate it. I don't want you to. But you do need to do it in such a way where the customer can remember what their problems were, and you can see that this is a solution. So in your scope of work, be specific. And utilize a financing calculator in your proposal. when you start doing the pricing, this is what's going to happen, is you're going to have your standard, okay, this is a system design, this is how many cameras, this is how long it's going to take, the labor associated. Then if we want to quote monitoring, or whatever the hosted service is that you want to quote, it's going to be X per month on top of that. Instead of presenting a proposal where you have an upfront capital expense and an ongoing monthly payment, put it all together in one single monthly payment. It makes it easier for your customers to swallow. It's easier for them to budget for, and it offers really an opportunity for them to have a budget for their security this year, next year, the year after that, the year after that. They know exactly how much their security is going to cost them. And in that time frame, you can add cameras, you can add doors, you can add all kinds of things to the system and keep their payments the same and just continue extending the term. So it's really good for you to consider using financing, and it makes it a little bit easier, like I said, for them to budget and swallow that monthly payment. And we have been working closely with PSA. I think most of you on this call are PSA dealers. PSA obviously is our partner for the equipment sales. And one of the things that I've seen is that because that challenge where I go back to the estimator and they're not willing to help me, the project manager is too busy, and I can't get a blessing on this quote. So now I'm late, all those problems. I know integration is custom. It's all about tailoring things and using engineering expertise to make things work in a really unique, beautiful way. And I'm not saying that your engineering expertise isn't important. However, when you're selling services like this, it is important that you design the system, with that in mind, with what the service is in mind and what the equipment compatibility is. In addition to that, if you can allow your salespeople to know that there are these packages where we know about how long it takes to install 8 of those cameras. So if we go ahead and factor in an estimated labor and installation cost, the camera cost itself, and whatever other things that are going to be associated with the quote, and give that salesperson a little freedom to just go out and quote things based on a predetermined package, it'll simplify the sales process a tremendous amount. It'll shorten your sales cycle, and it can help regulate some of your margins on these things as well. So we're working closely with PSA to put some packages together with the products that we recommend, and we can help you with this. Now, submitting the proposal is one of the last steps where you need to educate and inform your customer, don't present too many options, and anticipate any questions that they might have. You also need to be confident that the solution that you are presenting is indeed the right fit for them. So if you don't feel it is, then don't quote it. But if you know that they could use monitoring, if you know that this hosted access control system could save them a lot of money and it could generate the RMR that your company needs, then that's something you should really be including. Include the subscriber agreement and the finance application at the time when you submit the proposal. That way they already have the paperwork they need. The application is just one page. The subscriber agreement shouldn't be too complicated. Read the agreement before you go in so that way you can answer any questions they have as they read through it. Be persistent when you're trying to close a sale. Now that you've given them the proposal, you need to be sure that you're persistent in following up, finding out how the different decision makers received your proposal. Help them envision the services in place. When I added this bullet, I was thinking, like, how am I going to explain this? But if you can call and follow up and say, we're just talking about your project and anticipating, that we're going to be able to assist you with this. And we really like to understand, who would you want us to notify when this occurs? What about this? Is this a concern for you? Help them start to see how these services would work for them on a daily basis. And discuss their security budget with their financial decision maker. Find out whether they're using a capital budget, or if they have, an operational budget that would allow them to use this. The financing, I think a lot of people have sort of they make assumptions about how that money works, and there are a lot of different ways of doing it so it can meet your customers' needs. So definitely discuss the budget and the cash flow situation with the financial decision maker, and identify and relate to all of the other decision makers that are a part of this process. It's really important that everybody is aware of the opportunity and what this means, as well as, you know, getting them to kind of envision, again, themselves using the service and how much more efficient they could be if they had access to that service. So that really brings us to a close of the presentation today. I want to thank you all for your time, and now I'd like to open it up to any questions that you might have. Just use your chat feature or the questions and answer box in the bottom right-hand corner of your control panel, and we'll field those as they come in. Let's see, I've got a couple here. Let me just read through it real quick. Okay, excellent question. The question is about pricing. It says, you know, where can I get access to your price list? So our price list is really simple. We actually have created a price workbook where I have all of the different services that we offer and all the pricing so you can see it. And you can just enter in the quantities of each thing, and it automatically totals it for you, and it gives you all of the answers you need of what you should put into your proposal, and it generates the purchase order as well automatically. So for everybody on this call, I'll go ahead and submit to you the price book so you can start reviewing it, and I will do that in good faith that you won't share that with anybody unless you feel it's necessary for that particular job. Okay, another question that just came in was, you mentioned that you have tested video analytics providers. Can you tell us who you recommend? So as far as that's concerned, we've used VideoIQ. We've used what's called UDP, which is a brand you may or may not be familiar with. They're currently kind of white labeled by a few different providers, and I can tell you how to get access to them. But those two video analytics have really been the ones that the Monitoring Center has tested and approved, and they've been out in real field applications, and they've delivered on that expectation. So I'd recommend any of those players. And let me read this next question. Okay, so some companies have capital budgets and managed services fall outside of that. How can you handle that? That's an excellent question. So the way the financing works is they actually can do, there's two different financing options. You can do it as an operational expense or a capital expense. The operational expense is kind of like a lease. I think we're all kind of familiar with the term of a lease before. And typically a lease has like either a dollar buyout or a fair market value buyout at the end of the term. So in essence, they're really just kind of renting the equipment. Whereas with a true finance, it's more like buying a car versus leasing a car, where you can, instead of writing it off as an operational expense and deducting it that way, you would look at it, you take the depreciation, and it would actually look like a true capital expense. So there are different ways. Now, I'm not the expert, I'm not the bank, but I can get you guys in touch with the bank that we use, so that way they can address those questions in more detail. But there are different financing tools that can be used so that that money is usable either way. And that's all the time we have today. I wanted to keep us under 40 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and close it out. If you had a question that I didn't get to, I have your email, and I'll follow up with you individually. But thank you all for your time. I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.